metronome is a device that allows you to really hone your ability to play with perfect timing. We're going to use it in my class if the SoundCloud tracks are too fast, the videos are too fast. So instead of just practicing without any rhythmic context, right, you're able to get more bang for your buck, as they say, right, by practicing with a metronome. And you can practice slower or faster than the SoundCloud tracks or the videos are. So let's talk about how you're going to get a metronome. Back in the day, you might have bought a physical metronome that would sit on top of a piano or something that you'd have to carry around in your guitar case. These days, most people have them on their phone, their watch, their laptop, their tablet. Okay, so I'm just going to start us out here in the Mac App Store. If you're an Android user, go to the Android store and you're just going to write metronome at the top. And you're going to get a ton of choices here, okay? So many different kinds, so many different variations. Here's one that does just conga. And it's really fun to download a bunch and play around with. For today, for the lesson, I'm going to focus on this one here called Pro Metronome. It's a good one, and it has a free version and then an upgrade version, which I think is $2.99, or maybe it was $3.99. I can't even remember. So I'm going to walk you through these basic features right now. The first thing you're going to notice is this big wheel in the center here on the bottom. As we turn this to the right, you'll notice the numbers going up on the top. Tempo is the speed of a piece of music, okay? So this is, as you go higher, those are faster, and as you go down, the piece is slower. You see those words to the right, that's all Italian, and those are all just different expressions of tempo, faster or slower, right? If you want to do it more precisely, you can hit the right button or the left button. Okay, and that will bring it up just 1 point either way. The second thing I want to mention is actually this tap function here on the bottom right. If you're listening to a piece of music and you want to know what the beat is just out of curiosity, or you want to practice with the metronome at that same tempo, you can literally just tap on the screen and it will make note of how you're tapping and it will tell you what the tempo is. So that's useful as well. So that's the tap function. So the next thing I want to talk about is if we look to the right of tempo, so it says T.S, that means time signature, okay? And if I tap on that, you can either tap right underneath there, or you can tap on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen as well, and that brings up the same menu here. To the left, we have these two buttons that say beat. If you want 3 beats per measure, put 3. If you want 2, you press 2. You can go up to 5, 6, whatever you want, okay? So that's how many beats we have per measure. To the right of that, on the right side of that slash, is what kind of a note receives that beat. Okay, so if you're a beginner and you still don't know what quarter notes, eighth notes, whole notes are, don't worry, we're going to get to that. But this changes it. So now this is 4 half notes per measure, 4 whole notes per measure, 4 quarter notes per measure, 4 eighth notes per measure, okay? So this is how we change time signatures. The ones we're going to use in this class mainly are 4/4 and 3/4. So now we're going to talk about, on the top of the metronome, you can see here these 4 columns that are underneath the tempo and the time signature and the subdivisions, which we'll explain in a second. So what these columns here represent are the different beats in the time signature. So if I change the time signature, for instance, if I go to 5/4, you'll see there's 5 columns. If I go to 6/4, etc. So these correspond to the beats in the time signature. And what it enables us to do is assign a different type of sound to each beat. So this is very important when we're working in different time signatures. First, let me just show you how this metronome works for assigning the different sounds. And remember, almost all of the metronomes are going to have very similar features. The interface will be different, but they all have the same features more or less. So let me bring it down to 1/4 just so you can clearly hear what the sounds are. So if I press play on this now, you'll hear a primary accent. So it's a particular click and it's got the red light flashing. If I bring it down 1, this is what we call a sub-accent, okay? And so you would use this to put a different sound on a secondary beat. If I bring it down here, this is what this app is just calling kind of just a regular beat. And then lastly, no sound whatsoever. So let's talk about using this in the context of a time signature. If I go back to 4/4, which again is one of our most common time signatures that we're going to see in the book, and you can easily just go ahead and assign an accent on beat 1. So now you can clearly hear where 4/4 is. So that's useful because if we had them all equal, you could be playing a piece, and if you're not looking at the screen, you could add a beat or drop a beat and you wouldn't be aware of it. This way, when you have it accented, you'll always know where beat 1 is. So that's very important. The next thing I want to talk about is the gray bar underneath the columns, and this gives us visual accents. So let's talk about this. So we're going to have a few different options here, and we'll have a pendulum mode, which as you see is going to go back and forth. So that's actually super handy at the slower tempos because then you can it really helps you see where the beat is going to be. There's so much time in between the beats, so this is very useful. They use this a lot in film scoring where they need the orchestra to play to a picture. The next option is going to be all beats. Let me speed this up again. So now it's going to click a certain color for the first beat, and then it will click in other ones for beat 2, 3, and 4. Turn it up a little bit more. So that's the second option in this metronome. If we switch it to only accents, now it's just going to hit on beat 1 as far as the light. And then if you wanted to, you can go to accents and sub-accents. So let's say I wanted to have an accent on beat 1 and a sub-accent on beat 3, and I wanted to not only hear the different sound, but also see a visual cue for that. So now let's talk about how we might use the metronome in the context of the class. So let's say that we're taking a piece like Vámonos, our first piece, okay? And it's too fast. You've tried to play with the video, you've tried to play with the SoundCloud, it's a little bit too fast, but you still want to be working on your rhythm while you're practicing and learning this piece and learning how to read the music and play with good technique. So let's set it down nice and slow. How about 70? You'll hear now, there's 4 beats per measure. And if I was going to practice Vámonos, it would just sound like this. 2, 3, 4. Etc. Okay, so that's a nice way to practice it. If you want to speed it up, you just speed it up until you get to the tempo of the SoundCloud or the videos, and then maybe you want to even go faster. So then you just crank it all the way up, and then you play it wherever you want. So that's one example of 4/4 time. And let me give you another example. How about if we switch over to 3/4 time for a piece like Carousel, or you might want to play Orbits, something like that. Okay, so I'm going to slow it down and I'll play just a little bit of Carousel as an example. So we're in 3/4, nice and slow, because the piece is new to you, so you're still having to really work on reading the notes, but now you're working on your rhythm and your reading and your technique all at the same time. Etc. So now I want to talk about a couple features that are in the paid version. So the first thing, if you look in the upper right-hand corner of the lower part of the metronome, we see these 3 lines there with the dots. This opens up our setlist menu. So this is really useful if you've created a bunch of different songs. You don't want to have to take the time to reprogram those every time you sit down to practice. So you can create a set list. So you can see here's a bunch of songs I created, and as I tap on it, it moves through the different songs that I created. And if you just tap it again, it stops. The way you save it, if you wanted to, let's say here, I'll just save it at 107. You open this up, press in the upper left-hand corner, and then you can save a new song. You can name it whatever you want and save it. So that's Setlist. It's pretty simple. You can open it by just swiping left or by touching in the upper right-hand corner. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is in the very upper right-hand corner of the metronome is the subdiv, and what that stands for is subdivisions. So this is super important as well, and I'm going to show you a couple examples from my book that you can use this with. So when you click on the quarter note there, it opens up the subdivision menu, and you can see now I'm in 4/4, and I have it set for the subdivision to be a quarter note. So that means when we play this, you're going to be hearing the quarter note, okay, for each beat. Now let's say, for example, let me go to the set list, and I'm going to just pick a song I programmed, Lullaby. Lullaby, you'll notice it is pretty slow, okay? It's at 40, and so if you're just playing along with the quarter notes, because the piece is 1/8 notes, it's pretty hard to really nail it. I'll give it a try. So I can do it, but did you hear how that last note I was a little bit early? If I switch this now to the subdivision of the eighth notes. Now when I play it, it's going to sound quite a bit easier because I'm going to hear the eighth note in between the quarter notes, particularly if I go to accents and sub-accents. So check this out. And 3 and 4 and. So it's quite a bit easier to lock in because you're hearing, it's giving you a rhythmic reference twice as often as opposed to doing it on quarter notes. So that's one example of how you might want to use a subdivision feature. Another song that I programmed is this piece called 3-Play. And this is in 4/4, and it's usually, we're feeling throughout that piece, a eighth note triplet pulse. So if I do it like this, let me just put it down a little bit slower. And now I'll try playing it just as is here. And so this will go 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3. So again, it's possible, but it's a little bit trickier than if I open up the subdivision menu and I select now eighth note triplet over here on the right. So now what we're going to hear when I play this is we're going to hear the eighth note triplet. So check it out. 3 and 4 and Lastly, I just want to say, have fun with the metronome. Don't just think of it as a formal tool that you're going to use for my class. You can use it for songs that you're writing, covers if you play in a band. Just turn it on and just jam with it. Anything that you want. You can also try using some different drum apps. There are some drum beats that are built into metronomes. I also have some ones that I've downloaded. This is one I like called Drum Genius. I have some different things I've saved on here. I'll just pick a calypso rhythm. Just play along with it.